Last time. Welcome to a Football Show Thursday edition. Normally that is Zach Lyons. That is Easton Freeze in for Zach again, dealing with some family stuff. So send him your well wishes. My name is Braden Gall. You can get to me on Twitter at Braden Gall. Of course, Easton, host of the Hot Read podcast. We will get to that particular show coming up. Your producer, who is apparently 9 years old, we're gonna have a conversation.
I'm only 10, so it's close.
Well, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna have a conversation about said producer, and if you need to text him to tell him to get into the comments,
texting him,
you might want to do it. So there's going to be some fun a little bit later on in the show. Of course, we will preview all the big matchup with Minnesota coming up. How are we going to watch it? What positions are we going to watch? Of course, and should the Tennessee Titans be playing their starters? Teams across the NFL do this very differently. And certainly that's a major topic of discussion going into preseason game number 2 with the joint practice against Minnesota, but also because of the injury to Treylon Burks. So we'll get to all of that. It all works together. And we'll do some book learning to some young folk on the pod as well. So
all right.
Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, of course, our 2 great local sponsors. Make sure you go to Nashville Scene Best of, vote for Sinkers for best liquor store in Nashville. They won it last year. They're trying to defend their championship this year. And of course, they have a mini beer fest coming up on September, the first weekend of college football. I believe it's September 2nd at Bluegrass's Beverages 50th anniversary. There's going to be like 8 to 10 breweries out there. They're going to have a bunch of food trucks, TVs to watch college football. It's going to be a ton of fun. They got all kinds of cool stuff. So it's going to be a ton of fun. We'll tell you more about tickets and the menu and all that good stuff. You can get all that stuff. Of course, I think the beer fest, I think, is free to show up. They've got some other events that you can get tickets for.
JT and I aren't old enough for that, but we'll be there. Sounds like a good time.
I don't know if you're legally allowed to drink beer.
We'll just hang out. Yeah, we'll get a water.
Sure. I'm not. We'll see. We shall see. But any producer worth their salt will be there. So, okay.
I hope that's what this is about, because he's a moron.
So we'll get to that in a little bit later on in the show. So, D Good, of course. I'm not sure how I feel about Zach not being on the show. I like Easton, but the threat of a what the fuck are almost none. Are you allowed? Do you feel comfortable? Is it against your religion to say what the fuck? Can you do it?
No, not at all. It's just the brand of our show. But I can lean into the brand of this show. I will fucking lean into the brand of this show. I do not care.
There we go. I like it. See, look, D Good, we are making chicken salad out of chicken shit. Okay.
That's right.
That's right. That's what we're getting to today on the pod. Okay. Tennessee Titans, Treylon Burks, they're up in Minnesota. Wednesday happens. The video happens. It takes place. By the way, reporters not allowed to take the video, but of course fans can take the video of what happens. He catches a long pass. What I was told is one of only 2 like big pass plays of the entire session.
One was a blown coverage. Wasn't even really a great
pass.
You know?
And I do want to get your thoughts generally on 1.5 practices. They are actually ongoing right now. I think the number one takeaway for me is that Minnesota is much better than Chicago. That's my number one takeaway.
Yes.
But only a couple of good plays. The offensive line got pushed around, but more importantly, Treylon Burks catches this long, deep pass. He's got a ton of momentum. You see it all the time on a deep route where like you've stumbled to catch the ball, but you're trying to keep yourself upright. And so therefore your legs kind of get ahead of you. And sometimes, like, honestly, when I saw the video, I was like hyperextension. Like
that's what it looks like to me too. I'm with you. Yeah.
Classic looks like a hyperextension. Turns out, of course, Ian Rappaport, who I'm assuming, and for those who don't know, got his information from Rand Carthon. I'm just gonna put that out there. Good buddy, Rand Carthon and Ian Rappaport. Rappaport, of course, puts out the Treylon Burks LCL sprain and will only miss potentially a couple of weeks. So just this team has avoided this for most of the preseason. They have been relatively healthy, other than a couple of guys that probably are not top 53. And the news is not huge nationally. It doesn't make huge headlines nationally. It certainly matters to fantasy football players. But I could not think of a bigger injury. Other than Ryan Tannehill, I'm not sure I can think of a bigger injury to have taken place at this stage of camp than Treylon Burks. And it's not good news, but it's not the worst news either.
No, it certainly is a big sigh of relief. And I know based on the recent history of this team, a lot of Titans fans were assuming the worst for about 2 or 3 hours there. Like you said, it looked like a hyperextension on the video, which wasn't the highest quality, but it at least existed, unlike what you'd get at Titans camp. It turns out with the LCL injury, it sounds like it's essentially straining your LCL is a hyperextension, but instead of it's sideways with your knee. And so that tendon on the outside of your knee gets strained and he'll miss, it sounds like, a matter of weeks. Sounds like he could be potentially ready to go week 1, if not a couple of weeks into the season. Is probably more realistic, but it's not a he's going to miss half the year kind of thing. Certainly not a miss the whole year kind of thing. And I'm with you in terms of name value that I can't think of a bigger injury to happen this time of year. I mean, I would argue if, Derrick Henry tore his ACL, that'd be a pretty big deal for this team and would make fans equally, if not more, upset. But I would say in terms of value to the team, maybe value to the team's success, and I imagine you probably agree with me on this, it would be losing one of their starting linemen just because of the supply and demand issue there. You lose Treylon Burks,
Yeah.
it sucks for sure. But DeAndre Hopkins still exists, and Kyle Phillips still exists, and Chris Moore still exists, and Chika Okonkwo still exists. If you lose Andre Dillard, you're fucked. You're done. Like that's
nice.
You're in. Yeah, there you go. You're in serious hot water. And so I'm with you that he is one of probably 5 names where if he had gone down for the year, it would have put a serious damper on this team and the fan base.
I think what's interesting, and I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but I think there are very few players that have elite upside. Like Dillard is an important piece at an important position. I think he kind of is what he is. I mean, certainly there's a chance that he's not that.
Sure.
In a bad way. I don't think there's a huge chance that he like just massively overachieves his contract. I think he's either going to hit his contract and be just the guy that plays left tackle for the short term. Again, it's basically a 1-year deal. But I think when you talk about development, stage of their career, who has the potential to become a star, there's very few names on this team that have that kind of elite level. Again, that's the reason he was picked in the top 20.
Yeah.
He has like a guy who could turn into a player who could take over a game. There's not many people other than Treylon Burks on the team. And yes, Derrick Henry is critical. I get it. I think Tannehill's number 1, of course, but we kind of remove him from the equation because that goes without saying. The other names on that list, like Kevin Byard, I think would be pretty critical. I don't know if Jeffrey Simmons tears an ACL, maybe this team is done, and maybe that's the one I should put ahead of Treylon Burks. That's probably fair too. But they've developed guys in the defensive line. They figured out how to run the ball without Derrick Henry just 2 years ago on a very good football team. So that's my reaction is like, which one would depress the fans the most? And outside of maybe Tannehill, losing Treylon Burks for an extended period of time would just shut down all the offensive momentum that I think fans have, if that makes sense. Because he does have elite level. He has elite level upside, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. And I think that if it's a matter of upside, yes, there are very few. Maybe he's the number 1 guy on this team in that regard, where there is a chance that this season is a tremendous breakout for him. He has that potential to impact a team like a true wide receiver 1 does.
Yeah, right.
And so that would have been a significant loss if they lost him for the season. And it looks like they haven't. Now they've lost him for some valuable reps, which I know you think is something that may be a detriment to his season more so than fans are taking into account. You were talking about that before we started. Do you think that him missing the rest of the preseason and training camp is going to be a big deal?
I think it matters a lot to him.
Okay.
I think it does. Now, we can discuss, and we will discuss this in a second, about reps in a preseason game.
Right.
I think missing practice time against Minnesota today matters to Treylon Burks. Does it define his career? Of course not. Of course not. Let's not go crazy. But I think a player who is on a path that he's on, the trajectory that he's on, the stage of his career that he's at, he needs good on good reps. And yes, you get that in 18 weeks of the regular season. And yes, that's what matters the most. I get it. But for a player like him, who has elite upside and has playmaking ability and has all this talent and didn't get enough experience last year, again, it's all contextualized. he is one of the only pieces, and we'll get to this in a second, that I would say needs to play some reps in the preseason. And again, I know teams do this differently across the league, so we'll get to that in just a second. And who we want to see now in place of him, but I think missing practice next week against Bill Belichick defenses is of critical importance to Treylon Burks' development. It's not the end of the season, it's not the end of the year, it's not the end of the world, his career, whatever. I'm just saying, sure. I think Minnesota's got some pretty good DBs. Belichick's a pretty damn good defensive coach. I think Treylon Burks is one of the guys that would have benefited the most from that work this week and next week.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with you on that. I think that it's unfortunate, and like you said, it's really, I don't think the next 4 or 5 weeks of practice, or 3 or 4 at this point, are going to ultimately, really impact the assuming he gets healthy and is back for the rest of the season, which is a big assumption. I don't think it's going to impact too greatly what he's able to do. But in terms of making that leap, missing these couple weeks of joint practices is pretty vital. I think you're right.
I do find it funny, though, like, because I agree. I try not to overreact to, like, oh, you missed a couple practices. But at the end of the day, like, why do you have practice? If it's not important and coaches don't believe in it and coaches don't think it works, it doesn't help you get better. It doesn't help you understand your offense or build rapport with your quarterback or manipulate coverages in a better way. Like, I'm just using the receiver position at that point. But, like, we can't sit here and be like,
why would they spend almost 2 months of their offseason doing it?
It has no impact at all. He'll be totally fine. And then be like, but why do coaches who make millions of dollars then have practice at all? Like,
well, that's a perfect transition into the conversation that we wanted to have next, right? The idea that, and this is something that I saw a lot of people on Titans Twitter yesterday. Really, there was some serious cope from them with Treylon Burks.
It was a scary time.
A scary time, and it's one of those things where it's convenient timing that they're saying it now. Like, it's very much a reactionary take. But this idea that, why should, and I saw it from a number of people, I'm not ducking naming somebody. I saw it from multiple people. Why should stars do anything in the preseason? Why should they do anything in training camp? Why should they run full speed? Why should they run go routes? Why should they, really be a participant at all when they could risk getting hurt? And it's part of a larger conversation around the preseason and the actual games. Should starters play? When, where, why, and how much? You see teams like Kansas City where every preseason game they have their starters, including Patrick Mahomes, roll out there for something, a quarter, a drive, whatever it may be. Yeah. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum, teams like the Rams, who for the past couple of years have been famous for wrapping all of their players in bubble wrap and unpackaging them on week 1.
Yeah. Super Bowl's off, boys, says Stoney Keeley. Of course, yes, that's the kind of overreaction we're looking for. Of course, yes. Let's get into
who are the Titans drafting in 2024. Today's conversation.
Which Illinois defensive lineman do you like, Stoney? So we're gonna get into how to manage your stars, reps, preseason reps. We'll get into that here in just a second. But I want to tell everybody, of course, about Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. The Kingston Group, buildkg.com is the website. Make sure you check them out. Locally owned and operated for over a decade. Award-winning, nose-to-tail operation. They will take your home from wherever it is today to wherever it is you want it to be, all in one place. One building, one group of people. They got an in-house design team. They're called a firm. Who calls himself a firm? If you're, firms
you have to be
are better.
Serious business if you're a firm.
Yeah, I'm an LLC. No one takes me seriously. Like firms.
No.
Firms are where it's at. Buildkg, of course.com is the website. So just talk to the Kingston Group before you make any big decisions about your house. We do have some cool news coming about the Sinkers Beverages Beer Fest coming up at Bluegrass in Hendersonville. There's going to be some cool stuff happening with us and this show and some other shows and potentially that event up there. So make sure you check that out. Bluegrass on September 2nd, first weekend of college football. Also, make sure you check out the one here in East, which is Sinkers, of course. And make sure you check out Uber Eats and search Sinkers and deliver the booze, Easton, directly to your house.
They drive so you can drink.
There you go. Well done, sir. Good job. You know what you're doing. So there you go. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group. We love you guys. Please, everyone who's listening, go support them. And just remember the names in case you need any help with your house, Kingston Group. Okay. Should the Stars play? You just mentioned the sort of different approaches from across the NFL. Kansas City plays their guys. LA Rams don't. I think it's honestly, I'll start with my own take is it's a player by player situation.
Yes. Correct.
Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry. I might put Kevin Byard and DeAndre Hopkins. Let's just say those 4 guys. I don't think they need preseason reps.
You think Jeffrey Simmons needs preseason reps?
Okay, maybe I should have put Jeffrey Simmons on that list.
Include him, and then I agree with you.
Okay, so that they're the names that are established, especially veterans, that are established, that have been in the league a long time, that know how to prepare.
Nico Autry needs reps either. While I'm thinking about it,
that's probably fair too.
He fits that mold. Established veteran players, right? Yeah.
All right. So Stoney says no stars should ever, under any circumstances, for any reason, do anything ever. I love that. I think
him in a straitjacket in a padded room from April until September.
You're not even allowed to work out. Not even allowed to work out.
No.
Derrick Henry is going to tear an ACL running up a hill. So I think the people who are like 27, 28 plus, who have been, they're on their second contract, they know how to prepare their bodies. They are professionals. Like, those are the ones that I'm not as worried about.
Right.
Now, I want to ask a couple of questions about a few, because I think the young guys like Treylon Burks, who have certainly last year, after not getting a lot of regular season reps and had all the camp stuff that we talked about, mini camp stuff with the asthma and everything. Like, he's a guy that benefits, in my opinion, significantly from a series, maybe 2 series. I still don't think you play him a lot. I am curious about a couple of names that I want to throw out at you, because like Elijah Molden is a name that I know he played with the starting ones last week against Chicago. Molden is a guy that I would want to see out there because of the injury last year, because he's still kind of relatively young. But Harold Landry is the interesting one to me. Like, Landry, you already have an inherent sort of reaction to the knee injury, and you're going, oh, okay, like that. You sort of like tense up a little bit, you pucker up a little bit when you think about Landry playing. But isn't that a guy, because he hasn't had contact in like 20, almost when's the last time he had actual contact on a football field?
Just over 12 months.
More than that, right? Because he didn't practice. He was on his first day of practice. Like, he didn't
even the very first day.
I think it was like the day before or the day after.
Okay, well, we can say in game live action for sure. It's been
18 months.
18 months, yeah.
Yeah. Even more, maybe. So, like, the point is I think
a lot of months.
Having Harold Landry play a series might not be the worst idea because of the context of his situation. What do you think of Harold Landry?
Well, you're right that it sounds like a terrible idea on the surface. It sounds like the worst decision you could possibly make. But you're right that when you think about it for a moment, it does. The logic of getting him some reps, I do think it'd be foolish to like run him out there, and because there is this damned if you do, damned if you don't approach to an injury like an ACL when you come back. I've never seen a player come back from an ACL. Maybe Adrian Peterson when he ran.
Adrian Peterson is the only. Yeah, he's a superhuman.
Besides him, and he is the exception to the rule. I've never seen a player come back from an ACL injury and not have at least a couple weeks, a month, where you can tell by the way that they're playing, they don't trust that leg yet. Like, it's probably a mental thing most of the time. Like, they don't let them go back out there. The doctors don't, until physically they're probably ready to go. But mentally, there's that hurdle you have to get over of trusting, and that's why you get a lot of compensation injuries, right? You're afraid to put the full brunt of the workload on that tendon, on that knee. And so you do eventually have to, like, you've got to pay your dues with that injury and get up to speed. So you could argue that maybe playing as much preseason as humanly possible to get those reps out of the way would be wise. But on the other side of the coin, which is equally, if not more, if not more reasonable, is you are risking doing, first of all, going full speed a lot earlier than, every bit of time that passes since the injury is a higher likelihood of no re-injury or an injury due to compensation, right? Well, waiting as long as possible is good.
Let me put a timeline in there so everybody understands. Like, okay, because the knees structurally at like 6 months are 100% fully healed. You can begin running at 4 months. Generally speaking, 3 to 4 months is when you begin your running, your jogging and your running. Are you putting, to your point, extreme pressure on cutting left and right on the outside and inside of it? No. But structurally, your knee actually gets fixed relatively quickly. There's just sort of building back the ligaments, building back the strength. And then to your point, you get to that 9 to 12 month window, and then it starts to become mental, which is what you're talking about. Now, there's also guys that we've seen on this team that came back less than a year. Bud Dupree, less than a year. Robert Woods, less than a year. Yep. This will be over a year. Mm-hmm. And so I think there is a difference between those guys that came back in like 10 months and needed 3 or 4 games to kind of get back to themselves, and a guy who's going to be at 13 months by the time camp starts. Like right now, if he played against Minnesota, he would almost be at like 12 and a half, almost 13 months. You are physically ready to go at that point.
Right. Well, yeah, you think back to when Bud Dupree, in that instance you mentioned, is playing for the Titans. I believe he tore his ACL in late October, early November of that season. And then in the following season for the Titans was ready to go by the beginning of the year. But it wasn't until around October, November, where you started to see him look himself again. So you're right that with Harold Landry, we're at that full year point.
We're past it. Yeah.
And his DC, Shane Bowen, has said a couple of different occasions at camp that you look at the guy out there in practice, at least, and you wouldn't be able to tell that he's had a significant injury of any kind and is coming back from not playing for a year. And so I do think that there's an element there with this specific case with him where I agree, maybe letting him play a rep or two is not the end of the world, but I would have no problem with he's a player we paid to be an elite player. Sure. Let's let him be elite when we get to the regular season.
Well, and then again, let's also be very important. Let's make sure we understand, like, is it 3rd and 11? Okay, let's get him out there and have him come off the edge as a pass rusher. Are you more likely to get injured stopping somebody on the, holding the edge on 1st and 10 against the run? Putting a lot of pressure on that knee to hold your ground, or, do injuries happen more often when you're out in space with a tackle on a pass rush? Like, these are the things that I'm assuming the analytics side of things is doing for the Titans with this particular player. I think, and we can kind of bounce around the starting lineup here if you want to, because I do think there are other players that anybody who's on their first contract and has not been a full-time starter, I think benefits from being out there. Anybody who's a free agent who is new, I think benefits from being out there. Maybe not necessarily
the old guys.
Like
Hubbard.
Yeah, well, frankly, the offensive line is a different subject altogether. I think the offensive line needs to play 2, if not 3 series.
Sure. Okay.
Because they played 1 full one last time.
Yeah, so you mean on the totality of the? Yes. Yeah, I'm with you.
So then it comes down to, my question is the rhythm within the offense, because it is new, because you have new position coaches, because you have new weapons. Like the argument for Tannehill, not Henry. There's nothing Henry needs to do. The argument for Tannehill, and again, he's getting tons of reps in practice, so maybe this is a stupid argument, but the argument for Tannehill is, all right, live fire with new weapons in a new offense, and now you don't even have Burks. So I think there's an argument for Tannehill to play some. I also understand.
I still say a series or two. I don't think that there's any real. I don't see any real benefit to playing more than a couple of series. I think that the potential cost far outweighs the benefit after you get a couple of reps in the actual game, especially with this offensive line. You certainly don't put him out there behind anybody but the starting 5, and even the starting 5 raise concern.
I don't know. Don't you want him to get ready for that heat?
No, I want him to endure as little of that heat as possible. Because I don't think any amount of preseason repping that heat is going to change the amount of heat he was like. It's inevitable, the amount of heat he's facing in the regular season.
Okay.
So there's no point in subjecting him to any further that is unnecessary, in my opinion.
So then I guess what we're saying is, and again, this goes back to practice being valuable because it's practice and coaches want to practice, and practice, as I teach my 6 and 5-year-old, is how you get good at something. Practice
like you play.
I guess what we're saying then is the value, and I've said this for a long time. I think the value of this is why Vrabel has done this so often. The value of the cross training practices with another team, that to me truly is where you get the best work. Sure, you can't be hit. You're wearing the red jersey. The quarterback can't be touched. But if you're trying to ramp up speed and sort of simulate the game, I do think that practice is very, very good. It's still not as good as a preseason game, but it's still very, very, very good. I think the other, and this is something we don't mention a lot, a preseason game is filled with, how many guys are on the roster? Because the cut down date is not for a couple of weeks.
We're still at 90.
You have 180 players on the field for both teams, give or take, roughly, not at the same time. That would be illegal. But you have 180 guys out there, of which like 85 are out of a job, which means they are going to do everything in their power to try to win a job.
Sure.
which could lead to a guy flailing around the edge or a late hit or diving at somebody's knees when they're not supposed to. When you are putting in effort to win your career, I think there's a risk, an inherent risk there in preseason games that I think you want to avoid at all costs. So
yeah, no, and it's very different as well this year because it is. I don't think we did this last year. I think this is the first year where they're not doing the step down cuts, right? So you're not going from 90 to 85 to 80. Was last year the first year?
I think last year was the first year.
Okay.
Neither here nor there.
Mind.
Yeah.
Either way, it is different today than it was in the recent history where you have less and less guys, and by the third preseason game, you're much closer to the actual starting roster than you are with, again, still not. It's kind of wild that you go from 90 to 53. That's a lot of dudes out of a job. And I'd imagine there's some desperation there. So I'm with you.
When bigger scout teams, 16 guys, like there's all kinds of stuff that's beneficial. Also, scout team players, if you're on the team for the entire year, you make a pretty good living. You make
like $150,000 or something.
Yeah,
$200,000.
The first 2 year guys, I think are $12,000 a week.
Yeah.
And then if you're a veteran, it's $15,000 a week, which is better than a job I've ever had. So.
Yeah. Sometimes people ask me, they're like, football, what do practice squad guys do on the side? I go, nothing. They make plenty of money. Like
they do fine. They do fine.
They are upper class citizens still. They're just not quadrillionaires.
Right. And what's funny is like we have this joke all the time, the guy conversation, like, oh, how much would it take for you to get hit in the face by Mike Tyson? And I'm, it's like, I always tell people it's a lot less than you think.
Right.
Like, everyone's like $1 million. I'm like, no, you do it for $5,000. Shut up. Like you would do it for $5,000.
Today, Mike Tyson? That's the question. But old man Tyson, I'm in.
But man, take one punch, get one concussion for like $10,000. Every one of you listening would do it. I'm sorry, you'd all do it. Sure. You pay off a car with one punch to the face. Come on, we're all going to do it.
Sure.
I think everybody's number for all of those types of guy conversations is way lower than anyone realizes.
Yeah.
But asking me to be a scout team football player at the NFL level, that is a tough, physically demanding job.
That's not a one-off activity.
So,
yeah, that's a grind all year, no glory, just work.
getting popped. Old man Tyson is still an absolute savage. Yes, D good. I think he could still knock
he is. I'm
out.
just more confident old man Tyson wouldn't actually send me into a coma and then my grave than young man Tyson.
Take 98 Tyson with a boxing glove. I'm not talking about bare knuckle here. Like with a boxing glove, I bet
I'm still concerned. I mean,
I'm not saying we wouldn't need medical attention immediately. We all would, but to pay off your like kids' education or, to buy your car outright or whatever, pay off your student loans with one punch to the face. I don't know. I think
I wouldn't do it for $5,000, but would I do it for, 50? I think I'm starting to really consider it. It certainly doesn't have to get near six figures for me to start considering it.
I'm going to give you $5,000 to let me punch you in the face. Would you do it?
Like you? Sure.
Yeah. I'm a world champion boxer, right?
Right.
I got the belt right there. I'm not even kidding. It's right there.
All right, Stoney. Okay.
Now I cannot punch like Mike Tyson, but you're telling me I bet you take a hit from Mike Tyson for less than. I think you're all talk right now.
Maybe I'm way overestimating
the difference
between the punch of an average person and Mike Tyson because I feel like he'd kill me.
He would not kill you. You just have a concussion. That's all. You'd be knocked out. You'd be knocked out for sure.
Listen, I'm very CTE conscious. I don't want my brain turned into soup. All right. I'm so brilliant. I got to be protective of this.
Fair enough. Okay. So I hope JT's still hanging around. Your producer on Hot Read Podcast. Check it out.
He was earlier. He better still be.
I want to talking about. So I've got a bone to pick, which I hope he's heard before.
Okay.
A bone to pick with you. And I'm going to read off some phrases that have been used for centuries.
Literally, yes.
Centuries. And I want to know if you, Easton Freeze, have heard of these phrases.
Okay.
Because one of them on here, and I'll start with this one.
Should we preface why this conversation is being had? Okay.
Nope.
All right.
Go listen to the Hot Read podcast.
There you go. Bingo. The last episode, Wednesday's episode, if you don't know what's going on, that's where know. First 5 minutes, you'll figure it out.
And part of the reason this triggered me, I'm very triggered right now.
Okay.
Part of the reason this triggered me is because as I am getting older, I just have heard more phrases for longer, and I start to say things around young people, and young people look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, no, you're the fucking crazy one.
Yes.
So my wife didn't know this one when we started dating and got married. We've been together over 10 years. We've been married for 8. But she would use the phrase crocodile tears incorrectly.
How would she use it?
Do you know what it is? Have you heard the phrase?
Yes, I'm familiar with the crying crocodile tears. Yeah.
So what do you think tell me what you think it means.
I take it to mean like fake crying for
Yes.
attention, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes, you're exactly right.
Feel sad for you, right?
She
Like
she
boo-hoo.
thought it meant really, really, really big tears. I love you.
Just
I love you, honey.
the size of the water droplet
Yes.
down your face is enormous.
Yeah. So when one of our daughters, when one of our brand new daughters would start crying like just a massive cry, like a big cry where she's just like and it's like dripping down her face. She's like, "Oh, look at those big crocodile tears." I'm like, "Honey, I don't think you're using that right." So that's I'm willing to give that one a pass. All right, can you explain what these phrases mean?
Okay.
Sight for sore eyes.
A sight for sore eyes is something that you hadn't seen in a long time, and you're so happy to see it.
There you go. Do you think JT knows?
I would hope so, but I don't know. I figured making chicken salad chicken shit was like the most common phrase ever.
I mean,
apparently it was worse. It wasn't just him. It was me and the entire. We're on a rec league softball team here in town, and I'm the only person on the team of people roughly our age. They were all looking at me like I was crazy. I thought I was losing my mind.
Well, and the other one was worth your salt, which JT was like, "Is that a phrase?" I'm like, "Yes, extremely common. Extremely common phrase." But by the way, a sight for sore eyes dates back to the 1700s. Okay, bite the bullet. Do you know what bite the bullet means?
Just gotta do it. Rip the Band-Aid off, right?
Okay. I knew you're an old soul, so I figured you'd do well at this game.
I am.
But yes, you. But again, what it meant was you literally had to bite down on the bullet, much like you see somebody now biting on a stick when they're like doing surgery.
When they're sawing your leg off in World War I, right?
Yes.
Yeah, or in the Civil War.
Bite this bullet. So yes, exactly. That's what it means. Okay, we covered crocodile tears. Cat got your tongue. Have you heard that one?
You're just stammering. You're stumbling over your words. You can't speak.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you're good to go. You think JT knows?
I'm asking him. We're doing our show around 4:30 today, and I'm going to run all of these by him.
Caught red-handed.
Yes, of course. You're caught in the act. You're trying to get a cookie out of the cookie jar in the kitchen, and mom flips the light on. You're caught red-handed.
Again, 15th century Scotland. When your hands are covered in blood, that's where the phrase came from, because you probably killed somebody. Right, like you were caught red-handed. Has JT ever woke up on the wrong side of the bed?
Yeah, I've known him long enough to know that many days of the week he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. Whether he knows what that means or not, I'm not sure. I'm curious. Do you have the etymology of that one? Where what the phrase comes from? Like why? Like I know it. I know it. I know it means that you just like woke up grouchy. Somebody pissed in your Cheerios, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I've sources say it was a Roman superstition. So that's pretty
okay. Old. If you literally wake up on the wrong side, then you're gonna have a bad day. Okay.
I guess that's true. Sure. I guess that means maybe since you probably slept separately from your spouse, that you like if you rolled all the way across the bed, like
that's 1,000. No, it means that they like left you in the middle of the night. Like you woke up on the wrong side. Maybe.
No,
I don't know.
Easton, you didn't sleep in the same bed back in the day. You know what I mean? Like I assume it's because you just rolled anyway.
Okay.
This one was not actually one of my favorite ones because looking up the beginning of it was fascinating to me. Can't hold a candle. Yeah, that's what it means, but the origin is interesting.
Yeah, I mean JT's knowledge of idioms can't hold a candle to mine, right?
Exactly right. There you go. Would you jump? Do you know jump on the grenade, Easton?
You're the scapegoat. You take one for the team, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Guys, I'm brilliant. How many of these do you have to do to recognize how smart I am for the 7-year-old that I am?
I will say that one also changed when I was in college. There was a different term. It meant something different in college. That's neither here nor there. Sure. Can't hold a candle to is hoisted by your own petard. We'll get to that. Can't hold a candle to was apparently like you're an apprentice back in like the 1700s, and you were so bad at your job that you literally couldn't even hold the candle. Like for your person that you were learning from is where that
you would literally just drop it or burn the house.
Yeah,
they didn't trust you to hold a candle.
Yes,
okay, exactly. That's funny.
I've got when in Rome, break the ice, barking up the wrong tree.
I know all of those.
Rubs the wrong way, bury the hatchet. I don't even know if that's appropriate anymore, but like, yeah, you bury the hatchet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, put it behind us.
You have to run these by. How about paint the town red?
Water under the bridge. Yeah, paint the town red. Now, I am curious if you have the etymology of that one too. I mean, I just know it means you go out and you have a night on the town. Like
yes, that was about. I think it was about running around in London or in England. And it was all about like you'd have fireworks and you're throwing fireworks and like all over the city celebrating.
And the light is painting the town with the red glow.
Yes, okay. I guess that's where it comes from. Show your true colors.
Yep.
Put a sock in it, steal your thunder,
Yep.
spill the beans.
Yep.
Rule of thumb is an interesting one if you've ever seen Boondock Saints. But I just thought I'd throw these out there.
The only one that has been said that I don't like, I've heard but don't know the meaning of, is the one from D Good. I don't even know if it's appropriate.
Oh, jump on the grenade.
No, the hoist, or no, it wasn't D Good. Sorry, it was Jason McDonald. The hoisted on your own.
Yeah, well, he's not doing it appropriately. It's I think it's foisted of your own petard. I think, which means you kind of like you ruined it yourself. Like you did it. You did it to yourself.
So that's the only one that I've heard before, but didn't know what it meant. So now I can add that to my Rolodex.
Here's a couple of them that I want to throw out there. Again, we'll move on to football here in a second.
This is more fun. I like this.
There's two that drive me nuts, and I'm assuming that you and JT have both heard this before.
Okay.
But everyone gets it wrong, and it is now sort of accepted to be wrong.
Is it word to the wise?
The phrase "chomping at the bit" is not correct. It is not the phrase.
What is it? Is it chomping for the bit?
It's champing at the bit.
Oh, champing at the bit.
Because what a horse does with the bit in his mouth when he is ready to go is he champs on it, which is like very similar to biting and chomping.
Yeah.
But every Florida Gators writer in the history of newspapers have changed it to
chomping
at the bit.
Sure.
But it's champing at the bit. Yes, D Good, you nailed it.
D Good is right.
At the bit.
I didn't know that one. I got to remember that now.
The other one that drives me absolutely insane is intensive purposes. Not a phrase.
Intense and purposes.
Intense and 3 words. Intense.
It's not purposes that are incredibly dialed. right. Very intensive.
These purposes are not very intensive. That's not what it is. It's intense.
Well, this made me think of two that are the same thing. Like when you hear people say "word to the wise," the wise don't need your words. They're wise. It's word from the wise is the correct turn of phrase.
Is it?
It is. Because why are you trying to give wisdom to the wise? It's a word from the wise to the stupid.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look this up. That is
what I've always believed it to be. And then what was the other one I just thought of? I couldn't care less. People saying I couldn't care less, I could care less.
No, because if you could care less, then you would.
Right, exactly.
No, it is word. It is word to the wise.
Is it word to the wise?
Yes, because
I'll give you doesn't make any sense. Because I've always thought that doesn't make any sense.
No, look, I am giving you wisdom right now, so it's now a word to the wise. That's what I have given you the wisdom. Yeah, here's a word to make you wise. Is what
somebody explained that to me as wrong in the past, and I guess they were the morons all along.
There you go. Okay, I wanted to point out a bunch of phrases that may sound like I'm old, but like I'm 41. I'm not from the 1700s. We've been using these for hundreds of years.
That's what I told JT. When they made me think I was going crazy, I looked it up and I found the literature. Yes. I was like, this is on the record for hundreds of years beyond me, my friend.
They are ignorant. We're not old. That's the difference.
Bingo.
That's the difference. They are ignorant. Ignorant. That's what it is.
I'm not crazy. You're crazy.
Exactly right. Go to Sinkers Beverages and Kingston Group, by the way. And if this entire segment has made you drink, please Uber Eats Sinkers Beverages right to your house. The booze will show up right there to your door. So
they drink so you can drive. Wait, they drive so you can drink. There we go.
There you have it. Okay. Position battles, things we want to see. I mean, obviously, we can get we can get the Levis Willis thing out of the way right away against Minnesota. We're going to see them both play.
Sure are.
They're going to play probably about the same amount. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more 50-50 split.
I want to see more Levis. I felt like we got the Willis show last time a little bit, especially in the first half, because first of all, let me ask you this. Do you anticipate them doing the whole drive on, drive off thing, or do you think they'll go by half? Do you have any idea, any inclination?
I don't mind the strategy of like letting it play out. Like one time they put Willis out back in the first half because there was such a quick turnaround on the turnover.
Right.
That they were like, all right, that was a short drive. We're going to put Willis back out there after the turnover. And then of course he threw the ball through Josh Wiley's, stratosphere.
Yep.
I'd like to think that telling a quarterback that he's got some time, like you've got a quarter, or you've got four. Okay, hey, you're gonna have 4 drives. You're gonna have 4 drives. You're gonna have 4 drives. You're gonna have 4. Now 16, you might not get to 16. Maybe it's closer to 12. So maybe it's 3 drives. Like, I could see, and this is just the sports psychology guesswork happening here. I could see if I was told I'm off the field after this drive every time that I might press to do something different. Yeah. Whereas if I know I've got 3 straight drives, I might do the responsible thing, take the check down on 3rd and 8, or throw the ball away on 2nd and 12. Like, you might do something more responsible if you know you've got a little bit longer of a period of time to kind of show what you've got. So I'd like to see
especially
Levis
in a
start.
game that does not matter. Like, it's
Right.
hard to tell people you have one drive, don't do anything stupid. But if you do, it's not gonna
Right,
mean anything.
right. So I think that, I mean, obviously people are going to be talking about when the Titans and the Vikings get together, it's going to be about the quarterbacks. It's going to be about Levis and Willis. And let's remind everybody, as we did on Monday, that Ryan Tannehill is the starting quarterback and has looked very, very good in camp. And
Actual NFL starting quarterback Ryan Tannehill.
Yes,
he's that dude. Yeah.
Are you going to change the thing down below? Change that for me. Vikings.
Oh, I sure am. Yeah,
Yeah,
I got so enthralled by our our idioms conversation.
Very important that it says
forgot my job.
previewing. It's very important that it says previewing Minnesota.
That's what we're doing.
I don't know. Give me a couple of positions that I've got a few that I've got written down here. We can start with Burks before we get to our individual favorite ones. But like, what does this mean for the receiving core? Who are you gonna see? Who do you want to see? Who do we need to see at that position?
Well, it's funny. I would have said this, and this is something that I saw people talking about on Twitter today before we found out that Colton Dowell was not at practice today. I would have said Colton Dowell had an opportunity with Burks not in the rotation for today's joint practice, and then, of course, in the preseason game on Saturday, to, state his case, because we've been talking about him as a guy that's kind of on the outside looking in right now. I think this would be a perfect opportunity for him to make it clear that that his coaches should be fighting to keep him on this roster one way or another. I don't know why he didn't practice today. From what I've read, there's not really any injury inclination from yesterday's practice that we saw. I'd imagine that's what it is and not something that's off the field. But either way, if he's not practicing today, that's a big missed opportunity. And if he doesn't play on Saturday, that might be the final nail in the coffin of his chances to make the 53-man roster, to be frank. I also am curious to see a guy like NWI, who's been talked about as, is he fighting for a spot? Is he not? I'm mostly curious to see how much they play him this weekend. We saw in the first game, he played, I believe, 20 snaps, which was about in line with guys like Kieris Jackson. And
it wasn't top tier. It wasn't top tier. It was like,
right.
Well, no, Dowell's number 1 with 29 snaps. Racey McMath, 27. Mason Kinsey, 27. Reggie Roberson, 26. Those were the top 4.
Okay.
And we talked on Monday. Those could be the 4 that are battling for the 6th spot, which means
exactly
they might be battling for 5 and 6 now, depending on Burks's timeline.
Yes, and that's why with NWI, I'm curious, with him getting less snaps than those guys, you could spin it either way. It could be, well, they're not playing him a ton because they're not really trying to see whether he should make the roster or not. They're confident he's going to make it. Or it could be like you could argue, I suppose, they're not playing him a ton because they don't think he's really in that competition. I know where you and I stand.
Not one of those guys is better than NWI.
No, we agree on this, but I do think it'll be interesting to see, does he get the same amount of snaps? Do they see more of him because you don't have Burks and potentially Colton Dowell available for this game? I don't know, but I think it'll be fascinating to see just how much run he gets.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is interesting to watch. I think he is just such a safety net for the quarterbacks that you're sort of trying to put a veteran presence who knows what he's doing, is going to be in the right spots out there for both quarterbacks who are very young and inexperienced. D Good says, if Burks will miss week 1, how many of the receivers do the Titans keep? I don't think it changes. I think if he's out, you keep 6. If he's in, you keep 6. Yes. I think what it amounts to, and you already pointed this out, it is an opportunity for a couple of players to prove their value, in particular Colton Dowell and Racey McMath, because of their size and ability, which matches a little bit more in line with what Treylon Burks does. And you've already mentioned Dowell. This is about Racey. Racey, dude, 3 years in the league. Like, you're dropping passes. You had a couple of nice plays last week. This might be your last crack at making the Titans roster. And now Burks is out of the way for both games. You got to go show people that you belong in the NFL. And he's got the skills to be an NFL player. He's got the athletic ability. He's just got to put it all together. This is his, to me, this is all about Racey McMath. Go make plays and show people you are better than Dowell and deserving of a spot in case Burks is hurt.
I like that take. And I think my brand really isn't to be reactionary and over the top, but I don't think it's crazy to say that the next 3 weeks may be the pivot point in Racey McMath's career that determines whether or not he is a perpetual practice squad fringe guy on a team never really making an impact, or gets to play a little actual football and be a part of a team on their active roster out there on Sundays. That could be how significant the next 3 weeks are for him. So I think it's a big deal. with Burks not available.
So I don't know who else. I mean, Reggie Roberson, I think, is in line to maybe get a spot if Burks is not active in week 1.
Yes.
I think Mason Kinsey is just I think he's just sort of a backup at everything he does. He's backup return guy, backup
Great
slot
camp
receiver,
body.
just kind of a backup guy and a very dependable practice squad guy. He's not an NFL starting player, I don't think, in any way, shape, or form. So I think receiver is one of the most interesting, second behind the two quarterbacks, even though those are backups. What about what's next for you? What are you most interested to see position battle wise, groups of players? What is it you're most interested to see after quarterback and receiver?
Well, in this game in particular, it's the defensive backs. It's the cornerbacks for me. I'm super jacked to, and we don't know exactly what Minnesota's plans are yet for their how much their top end players will play, but guys like Jordan Addison, I'd imagine, are going to get some run in this game. I don't really know what the Vikings MO is with like guys like Justin Jefferson. I'd kind of be surprised if he plays more than a series or two.
Yeah.
But if he's out there at all, I would love to see what Christian Fulton, like, put him out there. Let's see it. Let's roll it out. He's a guy that was talking before they got up to Minnesota about how excited he was to put the clamps on some of these guys. And I want to see that. And then, just the depth of that position is better than elsewhere on the defense. Doesn't make it good. They've got their starting guys in McCreary, in Sean Murphy-Bunting, in Christian Fulton, in Elijah Moore, and then it becomes, can we see more from Trey Avery? I think that people are rightfully so starting to come around to Trey Avery becoming a reliable depth piece on this team. At the safety position, do we see any of Elijah Bolden if he gets some significant play in this game, like you alluded to wanting to see from him? Do we see him playing that nickel safety position some more, like the Titans seem to want to do this year? Do we see any, like Mike Brown, continue to emerge at that position for some depth? I find that pretty fascinating. What position for you is the one you're looking at most?
Well, I mean, the offensive line is the most important position group on the field, probably. So how long do they play the first 5? I think is going to be really critical. And they had one good drive. Okay, that's fine. I want to see maybe 2 or 3 drives, and then what do they do with some adversity? Like, what does it look like? There were a couple of plays where I thought they did well in run blocking, they did well in pass protection, and then there's a couple moments when you break it down player by player, you're like, oh, that play worked, but Andre Dillard got pushed back into the quarterback, or that play worked, but so and so didn't do this, or so I just want to see a little bit more tape of the 5 of them together. I think that's number 1, but I think that kind of goes without saying. I'm still obsessed with the middle linebacker position. I can't tell if they've got a lot of good options or a lot of okay meh options. I just don't know, because none of these guys have
pedigree. They all seem good because in a vacuum they're all the same, and we can't tell if they're actually good or not. Right.
And nobody has pedigree. So there's not one of these guys that was like a 5-star recruit and a first-round draft pick. Like, they don't have any of those types of players at that position. It's all late round backup guys, earn your way into the starting role guys. And that's the way Vrabel likes his linebackers. Jan Brown, David Long, 5th-round picks. Like, they like their guys like that, those gritty, tough kind of, gym rat type of guys. And they got a lot of them. I mean, Azeez Al-Shaair is one of those guys, and we think he's the best, but like, what else? Like, I don't think Ben Neiman is a starting player in the NFL. I haven't seen that yet. So I'm fascinated by the middle linebacker position. I agree with the rotational situational coverages in the secondary is going to be really interesting. Who goes where and when, because they really kind of do have 4 starting corners and like 2 starting safeties, but Molden kind of can function as both.
Yep.
He reminds me a lot of a less rangy, less explosive Antoine Winfield, frankly. Junior,
like
he's short, he's a little undersized, very physical. Winfield can cover more ground, but I think Molden plays safety for this team long term. Like, if he's going to be in the NFL, I think he's going to be a safety.
You think eventually they may just convert him to a full time?
I think no matter where he goes, I think he's a safety, or he's I
think you're right.
Again, if you watch a lot of the game or practice, they're rolling him up into the box, which is again that cover some tight ends, take on the run. He's just such a good physical tackler. Like anyway, I think those 6 guys, watching them rotate and then seeing what's behind them is interesting. But middle linebacker for me, I think the offensive line as well, and then. I mean, running back's not a particularly important position, but let's see what some of the young guys can do behind Derrick Henry. What is Hassan Haskins' future on the team? I don't know. And then the tight end position is wildly up in the air, because I don't know if you see Chig play. We didn't mention him earlier as a guy that might need some reps, but I think I'd like to see him get some reps, because a lot of progress at the end of last year. certainly lots of expectations for him this year. But you got a whole collection of dudes you don't know what to do with, whether it's Mack and Rader and Wesco and Wiley. Like, some of them are banged up, some of them are healthy, some of them aren't. Like, I don't think you know what you've got in that room right now in terms of what it's going to look like.
You've got 6 tight ends behind Chig that are all fighting for 3, maybe 4 spots. Like, Chig is for sure making the roster. I'd be really surprised if Wiley doesn't make the roster just based on the draft capital, but we've seen them.
And also catch passes in the field.
Sure. Yes. I think Treylon Wesco is probably making the roster because he's that glorified lineman role, and they're going to want to play a lot of 22 personnel and 12 personnel. But
I agree.
Beyond those guys, okay, let's say those 3 are safe, even though the second and the third guy I think still are up in the air. Then it's Kevin Rader, Justin Rigg, Thomas Odukoya, and Alize Mack. The only one of which that I think is clearly not on the team is Justin Rigg.
I want to see Mack play. I want to see Mack run some routes.
No, and I was so high
He's
on him
athletic,
early in
dude.
camp. He's athletic. He for the first 2 weeks of camp, he was making a play every single day that I was there. He's a really promising player, but he's already dealing with a lot of injury issues. He's not been out there a lot recently. I don't think we saw much, if anything, from him in the preseason game last week. I don't think.
No, I don't think he was active.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. So, like, if he continues to miss for injury, I think that he's going to be an easy one to not make that list. And they seem to really. And Mike Herndon was on this line of thinking earlier this week on Twitter. Thomas Odukoya, the second year tight end who was their international player slot last year. I forget, like, for the life of me, I can't remember where he's from, but I know he's an international player.
Europe, like Serbia or something?
Yeah, it's somewhere in Europe. I don't know for sure where, but he was their international designation last year, and so he was safe on the roster under that designation. They brought him along, and he is, in the passing game, not really anything super to write home about. He's a better receiver than a guy like Treylon Wesco, but he's certainly no Josh Wiley, for example. But in the run game, again, in that 12 and 22 personnel set combination that they like to run, those 2 different looks, in that first preseason game against the Bears, he was mauling dudes. I mean, he was really, really fantastic on the line, and it made me think of when we were talking to Chigakonkwo at camp a couple of days ago, if not weeks ago. The time runs together now. Somebody asked him about Thomas Odukoya, and Chig said that he thinks he's the strongest player on the entire team.
Oh, wow.
He said he's the strongest teammate he's ever had.
Netherlands, by the way.
Netherlands. Okay, yeah. So he's
nice
an
Dutch soccer player. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that he's a guy that may sneak onto this team by the end of things when it's all said and done.
All right, that's an interesting take. I like that. But I do think the tight ends are, the receiving core is interesting. Pass catchers, because no Burks, and I don't know how much you're going to see a Chig. You got Levis and Willis out there. They're going to be slinging it. They threw the ball, like 45 times last game?
40 something. Yeah.
They had 31 dropbacks for Willis, and then I think 15 or 16 dropbacks. So you're talking about almost 50 dropbacks between the 2 of them. That's what I think you want to keep seeing, and then you got to find out what you got in receivers. I think maybe a little bit more Kyle Phillips wouldn't be a bad idea.
Sure.
Just to get him a lather a little bit, because you're expecting him to be a contributor and give him some reps. So otherwise, I think
do we see more Tyjae Spears, by the way? Do you think we see him in this game?
I think what we saw last week is the right amount, actually. I think
another drive.
I think if he's clearly your number 2, I think you give him the football, and they force fed him on that drive. So it's like, if you're going to give him a drive, give him the football.
Sure.
Let him be the main driving force, see what he's got, let him feel good about his NFL debut, and then move on. I don't think you need.
No, you don't.
I don't think you need 8-10 carries for Tyjae Spears. I think you just give him his 4 or 5 touches and then move on and see what you got with the next guys. Because I know that people are very high on Jonathan Ward, but he didn't get a lot. He's been banged up, so
he's hurt now. Yeah,
right.
I think that that position becomes interesting now with Ward, because the conversation before last week's preseason game where Ward gets hurt, we're talking about, okay, it's Henry and it's Spears, they're locked in, but then it's 3 guys fighting for 2 spots. Maybe they keep all 5, but maybe 1 spot, right? I think it's more likely they keep 3 than it is they keep 5.
Yes.
So 1 or 2 spots, Ward, Haskins, Chestnut. Who's it going to be? And now you've got a situation where, okay, maybe Ward, I think Ward, if you polled every Titans fan and media member, Ward was probably the leader in the clubhouse of those 3 to make the roster. He's hurt now, which complicates things.
And
you've added this guy, right? You've added Jacques Patrick, or I don't even know how to say his name. This new guy.
That's a pretty substantial contract, isn't it?
It is.
We have not mentioned him. We probably should have mentioned him earlier.
Right. It's a multi-year contract, and he's coming off of, I think he played in the XFL this spring. I haven't myself personally dug deep into his NFL track record. But I know that they gave him the money that they gave him and the contract length that they gave him indicates that they want him around. And it's strange to me that they've now got 3 guys back there plus Ward, who's injured. Does his arrival indicate they think Ward may not be an impact for this team after all because of his injury? Is he the guy that they bring in because they're trying to further justify moving on from Hassan Haskins? I don't really know what that move was for. I'm curious to see where it goes and if he is even a factor in the preseason.
Well, so Patrick, Florida State, huge, pedigree player, played at Florida State at a high level, big dude. I mean, he
you know how to say his name? Is it Jacques
Patrick? And it's it's very to me, it's very Deontay Foreman-ish, the move, because this is a guy who's like 6'2", 230. Like, he's a big dude, and I would say he's like an insurance policy for 2 things: Derrick Henry, and also I think Hassan Haskins' court date is the day after the cutdown date,
August 30th. Cutdown is August 29th. Yep.
And you're not going to have, like, it's not going to be, the case isn't going to be settled on the 30th. Nope. so I think they're letting the legal process play out, but I think they're also looking for options. So
yes, I think you're right.
There you have it. All right. Last but not least, go to Sinkers, of course, Kingston Group as well. Make sure you check out Stack in the Inbox. Treylon Watkins there on some interesting stuff about the Tennessee Titans as usual on Zach's Substack there. So make sure you check that out. Easton, you are the host of the Hot Read podcast all over every single. You got the YouTube page as well as across all podcast apps as well. You can find that everywhere you get your podcasts. We normally end the show with Easton Asks College Football Questions. Do you have any college football questions for me today, Easton?
Oh, boy.
This is unprompted, so.
I can always pull something out of my butt. I'm good at improv here.
Wow.
Here's a question that is a very, very much not a unique one, but it's one you're hearing talked about a lot. And I know I'm sure you're familiar with Chad Withrow here in town. He's taken a lot of flack for, in recent days, putting together his version of what the NFL style divisions of conference realignment would eventually look like.
I was going to say noted Vanderbilt hater.
Despiser of Vanderbilt athletics, Chad Withrow. We love you, Chad. He's gotten a lot of flack for that, and he's made it clear online, or tried to make it clear to people, like, he hates this. And I'd imagine you hate the whole conference realignment thing too, as somebody that
I love it. I don't like what it's doing to the sport, but I love the content.
Well, okay, sure. So as a college football purist and longtime fan, you despise it, but for your job, you enjoy it. Okay.
And I think the SEC is doing it the best of anybody. It's still contiguous. It's still contiguous. Like, every state is connected, and that's not something that any other conference can say, truly. So
I guess my question is, do you anticipate, and this is how I feel, but I'm way less knowledgeable on this than you, do you anticipate us reaching this 2 mega conferences or 1 mega conference eventually? Mm-hmm. And how quickly do you think that's going to come about, and what might that look like?
2032, 2033, probably. All these television contracts, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC, all of the big time TV contracts for the 3 biggest conferences, all of them run out around 2032. They were all done short-term deals.
So no re-ups.
Short-term in TV contracts is like 5 to 7 years, whereas long-term is like 13, 14, 15 years. Mm-hmm. They were all done in a shorter window, because what is going to happen is there'll be a big giant breakaway, and it'll be it could be 40 teams, it could be 60 teams. We don't know what that number is going to be, but there are no governing rules that govern all of these teams any longer. There's no scheduling uniformity. There's no NIL uniformity. There's nothing that keeps any of these conferences from doing things the same. And what TV partners want, and this is to bring this to the NFL. The reason the NFL is a part of the problem too, because they're charging $5 billion for television revenue, and there's only so many TV dollars out there.
Sure.
The NBA is a part of this problem too, because they're going to charge insane numbers for their new TV deal. What has happened, the reason you pay so much for NFL football is you get guaranteed ratings. And in the playoffs, you get almost guaranteed quality football game, guaranteed reality TV show. In college, that's not guaranteed. See the national championship game last year.
Yeah.
And a lot of semifinals. So what's going to happen is if we go to a 12-team playoff and a bunch of games are blowouts, TV people are going to be like, that ain't good for business. we need to have the playoff games be more balanced, more equal teams, which means you're going to trim the fat and get rid of a lot of lower tier brands. And then you put all the money into a top 40, and then you get an NFL-ish style playoff where every team is competitive, and you don't have I know this is very complicated, but you don't have the the Georgia TCU thing,
right?
Where there's a 60-point gap in the national championship game. Like that is bad for business.
Sure.
Whether Georgia fans want to admit it or not, or SEC fans want to admit it or not, it is bad for business. And so that's a long, circuitous answer, but it's about TV money, and it's about getting quality television product for those partners. And what delivers that? Honestly, no disrespect to Vanderbilt, is not meant to be a anti-Vanderbilt stance, but like, not having Vanderbilt in your league drives up your costs. Not having Missouri or Indiana or Rutgers, or
you're taking that back once Clarkley restores the Vanderbilt brand.
I love Clarkley. I love the model that they're going through. I love the slow build. I like the culture. I like everything they're doing. Sure. And I hope the SEC stays the way it is for a while. But my bet is we've got one more era of normal college football. And then in 2032, 2033, we're going to have the new thing. And the new thing is going to be a 40 or 50 team breakaway.
Does that new thing involve the NCAA, or is
no? That's
the nonsense of the NCAA.
That's the breakaway. In fact, when you see those commercials that say, "Oh, we've got 5,000 athletes and they're all going pro in something other than sports," of the 366 sanctioned NCAA championships, football is not one. Football is not an NCAA championship. They don't make the money. The NCAA does not.
It's purely a CFP thing.
The college football playoff makes all the money, not the NCAA. Okay. The number one moneymaker for the NCAA is the basketball tournament. So the breakaway is going to be a football-only breakaway, in which case I actually think all the other sports in colleges will go back to the conferences they were supposed to be in, actually. That is gaining some speed. That is gaining some traction right now.
I like that idea. Okay.
We'll see. There's no reason for Rutgers softball players to be playing against UCLA. Like, it's stupid.
It's a lot of airline miles, kids.
You don't have the money. Nobody's got the money for that, dog.
Not growing on trees.
Ain't nobody got the money for BYU and UCF to be playing water polo games. You know, like, is it a game? Is it a match? I don't even know what you call water polo. All right. Thank you guys for hanging out. Go to Sinkers, go to the Kingston Group. Please remember the name of the Kingston Group, and buy your booze from Sinkers. Cool stuff coming as well. Check out the Hot Read podcast, stackingtheinbox.com, all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network.
Hey, we're live later today. If people haven't gotten their fill, we're talking with Sam Phelan live from Minnesota. If you want an in-person update on the joint practices, join us around 4:30 tonight. We'll be talking with him.
Boom. There you go. Check it out. Of course, on the 440 Sports YouTube page, the Broadway Sports Media YouTube page, and across the podcast apps as well. For Easton Freeze, I am Braden Gall. Thank you guys all for commenting. Thank you guys all for listening. Enjoy the weekend. We will talk to you next week.